All right, hello and welcome back to part three. Apologies for the delay for the upload. Just had a couple issues with power going out of the school, so kind of tough to get that going. But we are back with part three. We're going to talk about the limbic system and a couple of substance abuse issues with the nervous system as well. Just take a peek and try to understand that a little bit as well. So starting off, we're going to take a look at the limbic system and how this is going to affect your body's ability to remember things and connect that with deeper memory, deeper learning, that sort of thing. So limbic system itself, say it's a couple of areas deeper within the brain into the cerebrum and includes a couple of primary centers. You've got the hippocampus, often used for deep, complex thoughts. So if you have some deeper meaning or some logic into some memory, it's often stored as a connection through the hippocampus. And we also have what's called the amygdala. Amygdala does the exact same thing. However, this is associated more with, pardon me, more associated with things like fear, anxiety, stress, that sort of thing. So both of these are involved in this form of memory and learning, but they happen in different ways. I can give you an example of both. Imagine you're studying for a test and the test is a week away. And you could be a person who studies every single day for that entire week, but you don't really feel like you're getting anything out of your studying until the day before the test. And all of a sudden, you start cramming the day before the test, and all of a sudden, it feels like you're learning information that one day before. The reason is because you're learning by fear. You're scared of the failure, and anytime fear is involved, that amygdala is acting up. If you can learn to get beyond the fear, find deeper meaning in what you're trying to learn. So, people that are really good at learning, they're very good at finding the purpose in what they're doing. So, for instance, you go to your applied pre-cal essentials math class, whichever class you go to. Do you go there because you want to go there, or do you go there because you have to go there? And if you're in the latter, you're more likely to learn better through fear, which isn't the best learning option. Whereas if you're the kind of person who's going to these classes because you like the content and you want to be better, you want to understand what that content means, then you're more likely working with the hippocampus. That's the whole point of our school system, is to get you into a place where you can use that hippocampus. But unfortunately, it's very easy for us to learn by fear because we're taught to learn by fear. Another example I have is when you're in trouble at home and your parents call you by your full name. And then you're like, okay, something's going down here. Then you really want to listen to them. That's because your amygdala is telling you that there's something scary that's about to happen. You learn that and you're responding as a result. So here is your limbic system. Hippocampus is pretty large down in the central internal section of your brain. The amygdala is kind of small, tinier in the front part here. Both of them are connected in a cycle throughout the brain, including connected around or wrapped around that thalamus in the middle there. Anytime you have a sensation or a thought, it has to go through this limbic system. And this is how we're going to control our memory, which your memory can be formed in one of three different ways. You've got what's called short term memory, and this is memory that's going to stay for a very brief amount of time. That information is coming into your brain, it is going through your limbic system, but it's not really stimulating the amygdala or the hippocampus. So it's there, it's stored in your brain, but you won't necessarily remember it for a long period of time. It'll be there. We can extract that information in some circumstances, but it's not quite there. For example, first day of school. You kind of remember how that first day went. I sat at the front of the room, I called out everyone's name, I asked you a question, you asked me a question. Simple. You know for a fact that you were wearing shoes on that day. You know that you were likely wearing socks in your shoes on that day. That is in your memory, but you probably don't remember which shoes and which socks you were wearing, or what clothes you were wearing, which you know you were wearing clothes, but you don't know what you were wearing. That's because this went into your short term memory. You might have been able to remember that the day afterwards, but you don't remember what it was later on. You remember that you did something, but you don't remember it later on. Long term memory, on the other hand, this is something that stays forever pretty much. You have this idea, it gets connected either by fear or by logic, and it's with you for the rest of your life. So even when you're in your 50s, you're going to remember something quite vividly because it's stored in your long term memory. Quite often, it's associated with the amygdala or it's associated with that hippocampus. So you're either connecting that to logic or you're connecting that to fear, and you will remember that later on. The last kind is called a skill memory. Skill memory is a memory that you don't actually, it's not short or long term. You need to do something to remember how to function with it. So, an example is riding a bike. You probably can't explain to me in words. You can't make me a PowerPoint on how to ride a bike. You can write whatever you want there. It's based on your own experience. If you want to teach me how to ride a bike, it's a lot easier for you to get a bike, go on the bike, and show me what to do. But explaining it is harder because that's a skill memory. Another example would be swimming. Again, I could show you PowerPoints and I can give you notes and practice sheets on how to swim, and it can be as thorough as I want. But if I dump you off in the middle of the ocean and you don't know how to swim, you just know what we've told you in class, you're probably not going to do so well. However, if I take you to no classes, but instead I place you in a kiddie pool, and then a couple weeks later I put you in deeper water, and a couple weeks later put you in deeper water, you learn. This is a skill memory which you might not have formal training on, but you learn how to function with it. Again, same thing. Stimulus comes in, that is coming in through this limbic system, going through your frontal lobe, and then you're going to respond to that based on what information you have and how your brain wants to respond to that information. A couple of higher things with the limbic system or how we are going to access this information. Both the hippocampus and amygdala can deal with getting the stored information. The hippocampus does so by pulling things from all sorts of different areas and combining them together. If we go back to the example of what you were wearing on that first day of school, you know that everyone in class was wearing something, but you don't know what they were wearing. What your hippocampus will do is it's going to grab some information inside of your brain somewhere, and it's going to put clothes on the people you're picturing in your brain just so that they have clothes because you know that they were wearing clothes. You just don't know what they were wearing. So, in other words, it's filling in the gaps. Whenever you remember something, there might be something that you don't remember fully, and the hippocampus fills in those gaps and makes sure that you have that content there about an individual. So, anytime you remember something, let's say you're talking to your mom or your dad and talking about something that happened 10 years ago, and they remember it slightly differently, it's possible that your brain is playing tricks on you where it's just filling in gaps of things that you don't actually remember, but it's telling itself that it does remember everything else, so it fills in the gaps for you. It does this sometimes if you have this hippocampus connection. Amygdala, on the other hand, if you have emotions that are connected to a thought, you might be able to remember them based on that emotion. We also use language and speech when it comes to your memories. People that practice with language and speech, they have much better connections in this. So both those Broca's and Wernicke's areas are going to help that person communicate. The left side of your brain is often communicating more towards yourself. So how do I feel? What do I mean? What is my purpose? And then the right side is more global. So how does this affect my family, my classmates? How does this affect my team? What is the purpose for my group as opposed to myself? You have both parts, so you should use both parts. This is where this idea of left brain and right brainness comes from, which it's true when we talk about singular and global thought processes. It is not true for art and science brains. So if someone tells you that they're not good at art because they're a more analytical person, that's complete bogus. Or if someone says they're I don't know which one I said first. If someone said the opposite, it's not true. You don't have an artsy brain or a sciencey brain. You have a brain. And if you're not good at something, you have to get better at it by practicing. It just means that you haven't practiced. You have to practice to get better at things. So um, your brain is the same as it is in everyone else. There are capacities that change based on who you are, but you don't have an art or a science brain. You have both. You just have to work on both pieces. But just again, take a look at what your brain looks like. A couple of areas that I've highlighted that are separate than before. Wernicke's area for speech here, and then the Broca's auditory area near the front, which we talked about in our previous lesson. Broca's area here in this orange area in the front, and then the auditory areas in your temporal lobe here. If we extended or superimposed a human head on this brain, you'd see an ear in this region, which kind of makes sense. And then visual in the back. When we talk about senses in our later lessons, we'll talk about all of these various parts of the brain in a little bit more detail. Continue on, we get into a different part of your peripheral nervous system called your somatic nervous system. This includes your skin, your muscles, your tendons, and this is all this reflex information that's coming in. How is your body going to respond immediately to some sort of stimuli that comes in. And a reflex, in case you wanted a definition, is just a response that is typically automatic, not always, but typically it's automatic. Sometimes it's something that you can practice and get better at. So, hockey goalies, for instance, they practice their reflexes where um, if you actually measure the changing directions of a hockey puck during a game, especially at the elite level, it moves so fast that mathematically and physically it's impossible for a goalie to save a single shot. It's just too fast. But they practice on probabilities, they practice working on reflexes. So when their brain detects that puck in a certain region or a stick in a certain direction, they will move their body to give them the highest probability of making a save. So I don't know if any of you are hockey people, but if you are watching hockey, you'll notice that goaltender stats are actually shown as probabilities, basically the probability that they are to make a save. And that's dependent on how their reflexes respond to the stimuli that they see. You can also have reflexes that are completely involuntary. So if someone comes up to you and jabs their finger into your side, you're going to quickly jerk away from that because you have a reflex as a response. You're protecting yourself if you can in that situation. Another example of that is if you were trained in martial arts and someone, for whatever reason, walks up to you and wants to punch you across the face, you're going to be able to defend yourself through a reflex. So you're not expecting it, but your body is trained to deal with that if you have that martial art there. We've looked at the reflex arc before, so I'm not going to spend much time here. Stimulus comes in, sensation through your nerve, through your central nervous system, back to an effector organ of some sort. We continue looking at the peripheral nervous system. You have what's called your autonomic system, which is divided into two areas called your sympathetic and your parasympathetic divisions. Both of these are going to work to almost work in the background to keep you functioning. Quite often, this is involuntary. So you have no control over these, but they are there to keep you alive. These are the nerves that are connected to all your organs on the inside of your body. So you can get these stimuli coming in. You respond to them even though you don't know. Like, for instance, if you're hungry, your stomach churns, it makes a rumbly noise. You get this sensation in your tummy. You don't have control over your stomach in that sense, but you get those signals from this autonomic system. We're going to take a look at a couple of these. We're going to split them up. First off, we want to talk about the sympathetic division, where the neurons themselves are a little bit shorter, and these are going to mediate what's called your fight or flight response. It's hard to fully explain this one. You have to put yourself in a situation of extreme turmoil or stress. So, I don't know, maybe you're out camping or you're living somewhere which is a little bit more rural, and you're outside by yourself, and all of a sudden there's a bear face to face with you. Your body wants to keep you alive. If this is the case and your body is ready to keep you alive, it will initiate this fight or flight response where you essentially become a superhuman. And the reason why is your body is going to release a ton of this adrenaline or epinephrine into your body. Both are essentially the same thing. And this is giving you superhuman strength and superhuman speed. And you're going to activate one or the other. You have no control over this until you're in this stressful situation. Because you have superhuman strength, you might feel inclined to fight the bear because you are super strong, and you will be. You like if you get a good shot on that bear, you will damage that bear because you will have super strength. This is because your digestive tract has stopped, so you don't have any energy wasted elsewhere in your body. It means that your blood vessels have now started to pump blood faster, so you're getting more oxygen to different parts of your body, and you're breathing more oxygen because all of your bronchi have dilated as well. Not good for the long run. It'll last you maybe 5 minutes, maybe 7. If you're very healthy, maybe 8 minutes. And that's going to give you a very short amount of time of superhuman strength, which will completely exhaust you, but it could be enough to fight off that bear. Probably not, but it gives you enough strength to fight it off. The other thing it gives you is this ability to move really, really fast, superhuman speed, in which case, if you don't want to fight, you will just book it. You will run, and you will run faster and farther than you've ever run in your entire life. Again, bear is probably going to catch you, but in other situations, you could probably run away and you could survive that. This is your fight or flight response. This is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. Now, this is contrasted by your parasympathetic nervous system, which are long neurons all throughout your body. When you're in a state of relaxation, that's when this parasympathetic division kicks in. So when you're in a completely opposite situation from fight or flight, where you're in turmoil, if you're in complete comfort and rest, this is going to cause the rest and digest to function in the body. Slows your heart rate down, gives your body time to actually digest your food. As a result, you're not going to be able to lift weights. You're not going to be able to do exercise. You're not going to be able to move very quickly. You are very prone to getting picked on by a predator. So you have to be in a very safe place to get into the rest or digest. You can't activate both either. If your rest and digest is activated, I don't know, you're sitting outside, your safe place is outside on a picnic bench, and then the bear shows up, then both rest and digest get thrown out the window. All the food that you're digesting is either going to come out the front end or out the backside because you don't have any energy to spend on digestion anymore. And that rest that you had, it gets cut in half. So parts of your body are still shut off, but you go into this fight or flight immediately. Now, to manipulate parts of your body, we have this whole drug mechanism in the body. Drug mechanism always affects this limbic system. It's also going to affect neurotransmitters, either by increasing their output or decreasing and inhibiting that output altogether. When someone is considered abusing a drug, we're saying that we're taking that medication beyond what a therapeutic dose would be. So, for example, you got a headache, you take an Advil, you feel better afterwards. If you keep on getting headaches, though, and you keep on taking Advils, one day you might feel like, you know what? What if I take two? Now you're starting to abuse that drug. You don't need two. The one is enough for you. In fact, one is probably not even necessary. It's probably something very easy for you to fix. But if you keep on consuming these, you're starting to become an abuser. As a result, your body starts to expect that drug on the inside. And when the drug is not there, your body thinks something is wrong. And so you'll respond to that. It'll start to give you symptoms of illness. You'll start to get more headaches and you'll become more irritable unless your body detects that medication. We call this physical dependency. You've developed what's called a tolerance to that drug. Eventually, you need more to actually hit that same level that you had before. If you get rid of that drug, those symptoms get very severe, and we start to call those withdrawal symptoms. And a person can't recover from withdrawal that easily. Those are pretty much there now. If you continue using drugs at this point, then you start to become mentally dependent as well, where if you don't have it, all you do is think about it. All you do is think about how you can get it, and you'll do some freaky stuff to actually get to that drug because you need it in your body at this point. We're going to look at a couple of these. The first one is alcohol. Alcohol is both an inhibitory neurotransmitter and an excitatory neurotransmitter that we're going to manipulate with. And so it kind of changes how you behave. Have you ever seen anyone that's been drinking or even drunk? They're quite different, right? They behave differently. What's happening is this alcohol is treated as a poison in your body. So your liver is trying to take care of it, but your liver is supposed to take care of your fat. So instead, you start to gain a lot of this excess fat in your gut because you have had a drink. And it starts after just one night of drinking. You can't really stop that. The good news is if you stop drinking the next day, you rehydrate yourself, you get back to work exercising regularly, you can recover from this. If you don't, though, if it's like a summer holiday or a weekend, you're partying all weekend long, you get a little bit beyond that. And you get into this case where you start to get your liver scarring. And again, it's harder. There's a lot of pain involved, but you can get past this if you put yourself in a position to work out, drink lots of water, take care of your body, avoid alcohol for a period of time. If you don't do that, though, your liver cells start to die. You start to get cirrhosis. At this point, there's no helping you. You're going to be sick. It could be permanent. You could die from this as well. So it's a really nasty one if you're not careful with how much consumption is there. It's a tricky one because alcohol kind of sneaks up on you. It doesn't feel like you're doing too much. It doesn't ever feel like you're doing anything wrong. It always makes you feel good as well. But at this point, you're hitting in what's called alcoholism. Alcohol itself, the chemical structure is a carb. It has the same molecules as a carbohydrate. So your body treats it as food. When you consume alcohol, it thinks that it's eating food, so it uses it as a small energy source. The problem is alcohol does not have any nutritional value to it. So your body thinks that it's eating, even though you clearly drank some sort of drink, but you don't get any of the nutrition. So you start to lose that part in your body. So your muscles start to deteriorate first. Your body starts to break down muscles for that energy and nutrition. And people start to get very thin on their arms and legs, and they start to get a beer belly because their liver is not metabolizing any excess fat. This continues. Person gets very, very, very sick. It's very hard to get away from. If a person is pregnant and consuming alcohol, that alcohol can also cross over the placenta and give that fetus the same effects of alcohol. So it's born with withdrawal symptoms. We call this FAS, or fetal alcohol syndrome. You're going to see a theme here with the drugs and substances. There's no amount that is okay during pregnancy. As a result, if a fetus does get exposed to a drug, in alcohol's case, they end up having cognitive deficiencies or physical defects. So it can be pretty bad. Another drug which is very commonly abused, but not as much as it used to be, is nicotine, often found in various tobacco products. So cigarettes, snuff, chewing tobacco, cigars. If you go to a shisha bar, those are terrible. Like one dose is like 200 cigarettes or something like that. You get vape pens now that have nicotine in them. Nicotine's nasty because once it gets you, you kind of can't get rid of it ever again. So the withdrawal for nicotine is pretty much permanent. That's why they say someone who quits smoking doesn't actually quit smoking, because they still have those cravings. You can never get back to normal after your first dose of nicotine. So after that first cigarette, you're kind of on it for the rest of your life. So avoid it at all costs if possible. What it does is it releases your pleasure hormone, your reward center, dopamine. Dopamine makes you feel good. So when you see a puppy walking up to you, you feel good about it because all the dopamine is released. Or you donate money to someone in need, you feel good about it. You've released dopamine. Or you complete a homework assignment that was really tough, you feel good about it. Nicotine is going to cause your neurons to release it for no reason in particular. So you feel good initially, but then your body starts to expect that dopamine to be in your body. So the only way you can get it back is to get more nicotine. So people will continue to smoke more, and their goal is to get more of this dopamine into their bodies. Unfortunately, they can't ever return to that happy medium place because their body is now essentially not addicted to the nicotine, but it's addicted to the dopamine that your body produces naturally. So you experience withdrawal symptoms until you get another dose of nicotine to release dopamine. Never goes away. So the more you smoke, the worse it gets, sure. But even when you stop, when you stop, you're at a point where you're going to constantly want that dopamine dose anyways, and you're never going to get back to your normal place. So really bad one. You don't want that in your body. Again, pregnancy, don't want it in your body because it causes the uterine lining to peel off, and it can cause a stillbirth, or it can cause a child to be born early, very much below its normal weight. So it can cause it to become sick. On the topic of dopamine, we have this other medication. This is called cocaine, considered a hard drug, where cocaine will change the way that your body can replenish that dopamine. It's almost like a synthetic dopamine source. So when you have this in your body, it prevents the dopamine from going back to its storage point. And so you feel this pleasure for a very high amount of time, and it's insanely good. Like it's euphoric. You feel as good as you're ever going to feel. You have this really sharp, steep, pleasurable feeling. The problem is that it goes in two phases. That sharp uptake is the binge phase when someone uses cocaine. So they become very hyperactive. They feel incredible. They don't need to eat anything. They want to have sex with everything. But then they're hit with the crash phase, which is afterwards. So they keep doing these waves. It's like a graph where if you have your pleasure on one axis, you start in the middle, which is where you should be. The bottom of the axis is depression. The top of the axis is pleasure, euphoria. So with cocaine, when a person takes a dose, they go up to that euphoria, but then they come back down into this depression phase. But the interesting thing is they never come back to that middle point again. They start lower. So you don't ever feel as good after taking cocaine. The only way that you can feel better back to where you used to be is by taking more cocaine. You get back to that good feeling again. But that crash phase brings you even lower. And eventually you end up starting in that depression phase, which is pretty tough. So the crash phase includes depression, irritability, complete lack of sex drive, impotency in males. Um, it's so hard that you get this massive dependence as a result. And people often overdose because they get so low into this point where they start in depression that in order to feel normal again, they have to take cocaine. And in order to feel good, they have to take even more cocaine. But that leads to a very steep crash afterwards. So people end up overdosing very frequently on a drug like this one. Very difficult to recover from. A child or a fetus is born with these withdrawal symptoms, born depressed essentially, if it does get the cocaine in the body. It doesn't really make sense to use either. Like, yeah, sure, you get euphoria during use, but beforehand your brain is very active, and afterwards your brain kind of shuts down. So it's not really any value in using it. But for some reason, it's we don't really think of that. So people end up using it once and they're hooked on it, which really sucks. A couple more. I've got heroin, which is a synthetic form of opium. So it comes from a chemical called morphine, which makes you feel good. It basically takes all the pain away. The whole purpose is to get rid of all the pain that you have in your body, even things that you're not thinking about. So, like right now, you feel normal, but there are pains in your body that you're not thinking of because your brain's ignoring them. Heroin is something that's going to cut all those pains out. And if you have a lot of pain, especially like psychological trauma or mental pain, heroin's absolutely going to cut all those out. But again, as a result, you take the heroin, your body stops producing the endorphins that are there for pain relief in the first place because it expects them to be there as a result of the heroin. So that's the addictive piece that you get there. The tolerance is very, very fast. Like as quick as 1 or 2 doses, you're kind of hooked on it. So you don't want to get into a situation like this. Same thing, fetus is born with the dependency if it's exposed. The last one I want to talk about is marijuana, which is a tricky one because it's now legal in Canada. And marijuana does have a lot of positive medicinal benefits to the body, but the issue is people tend to self diagnose or self medicate themselves with marijuana. That is wrong. You should not be doing that. If you feel like you do have any concerns, psychological, mental, anything where marijuana could help with your anxiety or stress, you want to talk to your doctor about it. Let your doctor tell you, give you a professional opinion who knows and understands the biology of your body a bit better to give you that idea. You shouldn't self medicate because when you do self medicate, you're putting your body into a state of stress that you don't recognize, and it's very easy to get hooked on it. If you know people that smoke marijuana, you ask them if they would quit. They say that they have full control. They'll quit anytime that they want. But the reality is that's what they're convincing themselves for. They are hooked on it. They can't just quit. It's become a part of their life, and it's because it makes them feel this calmness, this sense of contentment. But it is altering their full judgment. Their motor coordination is lacking. Um, as a result, your body expects it. So when the marijuana isn't in your body, or not the marijuana, but the THC isn't in your body, the anxiety comes back. And the only way you can manage the anxiety is by taking more marijuana. People tend to get very paranoid as a result. And if it's heavy usage, a person can become a little bit psychotic as a result. So it's definitely not something that you want to self medicate. If you are someone that does use marijuana, you want to have a conversation with your doctor to understand the risks and better options of getting that into your body if you need it. But the reality is, it's fully unnecessary. You don't really need it unless there's a serious, serious condition. There are better things out there that are not drug related that can give you the same effect. You just have to be willing to work with that if that's something that you want. Same thing, watch out with pregnancy. This is one that's often ignored. There's a lot of literature and a lot of ads about drinking while pregnant. Definitely do not want marijuana while pregnant. Very similar situations to fetal alcohol syndrome. It's called fetal cannabis syndrome, FCS, instead. Very, very similar. Cognitive deficiencies, physical deficiencies, lots of those. So you do not want to be smoking marijuana while pregnant because the child will experience that as well when they're older. Anyways, don't like to leave on a sadder, rough note, but we are at the end of our first group of nervous system notes. I apologize. This one is a bit longer, but it does wrap together our first introduction on the nervous system. So I'll leave it here and then we'll get back together for the senses. And I think we'll have 1 or 2 sections on that where we talk about some of our senses. And after that, we'll take a look where we're at in the course. But I don't think for the time being we're going to go beyond that. So hope you're having a good day. Apologize for the long video, but thanks for sticking with it. And we'll talk pretty soon. Have a good one.